They were never supposed to matter this much, at least not according to the world's narrative. Not Iran, not Persia, not the enemy in the East, yet buried in ancient prophecy, hidden between the rise of empires and the fall of kings, is a shocking thread that runs straight through the heart of this nation, and it doesn't look anything like what you've been told. What if Iran isn't just a headline in today's conflict, but a cornerstone in God's eternal strategy? The truth is, Iran's role in the Bible is complex, disturbingly complex. One minute, it's the hand of liberation. The next, it's the fist of rebellion. God calls one of their kings his anointed, then later speaks of destruction from the same soil. How can one nation wear both crowns? And more importantly, what does that mean for what's coming next? This story isn't about politics. It's about prophecy, and once you hear what's written, you can't unhear it. The Bible outlines Iran's involvement in world-shifting alliances, unimaginable conflict, and unexpected redemption. Not someday, not eventually, but in a timeline that is unfolding right now. And here's the thing, you're not just an observer, you're in this, because prophecy doesn't leave anyone neutral. It invites, it confronts, it warns. And in a world that's already unraveling, knowing the truth isn't optional, it's urgent. So brace yourself, because what you're about to hear will shift your perspective forever. And the strangest part? It's all been written. The promise of protection, Isaiah 45:1-3, and the revelation about Cyrus. Picture this, a powerful empire, a people in exile, and an unlikely hero rising from the east. But this isn't a legend, it's real history, woven with divine purpose. In Isaiah 45, God speaks directly to Cyrus, the Persian king, a man who didn't worship the God of Israel, yet was chosen to set his people free. This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus: I will go before you and will level the mountains. Isaiah 45:1-2. The message is stunning. God uses whoever he wants, however he wants, to fulfill his promises, even those outside the faith. Imagine being a captive in Babylon, weighed down by chains of despair. Now imagine your freedom coming not through rebellion or escape, but through a royal decree, signed by a foreign king. That's exactly what happened. And it's as if God hands the prisoner a key, through the very one who once locked the door. I summon you by name and bestow on you a title of honor, though you do not acknowledge me. Isaiah 45:4. That verse doesn't just tell us about Cyrus. It tells us about a God who moves in ways we never expect. Think about your own life. Are you waiting for help to come from familiar places? What if your breakthrough is coming from the side you least expect? An unexpected job, a conversation you didn't plan, or someone you barely know. That's what makes Isaiah's prophecy so powerful. It ties hope to the impossible. So here's a question for you. Have you ever seen God work through someone or something completely unexpected? Share it in the comments. Someone might need to hear your story. Cyrus didn't realize he was part of a divine plan. He wasn't trying to please God, but God was still using him, precisely, intentionally, and without needing his permission. There's something incredibly humbling about that. It means God isn't limited by religion, titles, or boundaries. And if he could use Cyrus to shift the fate of nations, what might he be doing behind the scenes in your life right now? Spiritual climax. This is the moment that shakes the soul. Before Cyrus even knew who God was, God had already chosen him, prepared the path, and spoken his name. That's not just ancient history, that's personal. I will give you hidden treasures, riches stored in secret places. Isaiah 45:3. Maybe you feel like nothing is moving, but God might already be leveling the mountains ahead of you. He might already be unlocking doors in places you haven't even looked. The question isn't if God is working, it's can you trust him while you wait? So, if you're standing in a space where everything feels stuck, maybe your deliverance is already underway. just not in the way you imagined. The story of Cyrus is proof that God uses the unexpected to do the extraordinary. And if that's true, what part of your life is he about to rewrite? The unexpected alliance, Daniel 8:20-21, and the ram versus the goat. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been caught off guard by an alliance you never expected? Maybe a friendship that began in conflict, a job that came from rejection, a blessing that came disguised as a battle. In Daniel 8, we witness a powerful vision, a ram with two horns pushing westward, northward, and southward. No beast could stand before it. This ram, we're told, represents the Medo-Persian Empire, a symbol of unity between two very different peoples. Now watch what happens. A goat, swift and fierce, charges from the west. That goat, Greece. The result? Collision. Imagine it as a grand family reunion, where the cousins come together smiling and leave fighting over the will. That's what this prophecy mirrors. Unity for a time, then fracture. The ram once stood invincible, but the goat breaks its horns. This isn't just about ancient empires. It's a picture of what happens when pride creeps into partnership. The two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece. Daniel 8:20-21. God doesn't just reveal history, he reveals patterns. This story teaches us how quickly unity can dissolve when ego replaces purpose. Now, bring it into your world. Where do you see cooperation being tested? Maybe in your workplace, where goals collide with personal ambition, or in a relationship where two visions no longer walk in the same direction. This isn't just geopolitics, it's personal. Daniel's vision reminds us to ask, when do we fight for alliance? And when do we stand our ground? Are we sacrificing our identity just to keep the peace? Or are we listening for the divine timing that tells us when to walk away? These are questions worth answering. Drop yours in the comments below. This moment in Daniel's vision is explosive. But here's the key. It's not just about conflict, it's about clarity. God was showing that even alliances forged in strength can be torn apart, if not grounded in divine purpose. It's like building a bridge over a fault line. Strong materials won't matter if the ground itself shifts. The Medo-Persian Union served a purpose, but when its time ended, God allowed a new power to rise. What purpose is your current alliance serving, and is it still serving it? Spiritual climax. Pause here. Reflect. This vision wasn't random. It was given so God's people could discern the seasons, times of alignment and times of disruption. That's wisdom. But the people who know their God will be strong and take action. Daniel 11:32. You are not at the mercy of chance. When God reveals truth, it's so you can move with conviction. Don't cling to connections just because they once worked. Ask, is this still in alignment with who God is calling me to be? Clarity comes when we're brave enough to question our comfort. So here's the thought to take with you. What are you building, and who are you building it with? Because alliances shape destinies. Choose them with discernment. Keep your identity rooted, and never forget, even in broken alliances, God is still in control. Nothing escapes his design, not even the wars between rams and goats. The fall from the north, Ezekiel 38:39, and Gog of Magog. Let me take you into the heart of a prophecy, one that shakes the ground beneath us even today. Ezekiel stands, eyes lifted, and speaks of a prince named Gog, from the land of Magog, leading a coalition of nations down from the north to invade Israel. It's not a random warning, it's a revelation of something bigger, a spiritual pattern that echoes through time. I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me. Ezekiel 38:16. These are not just armies, these are movements. And in the shadows, God is orchestrating every step. Imagine an army of wolves, eyes cold, breath rising in the early morning fog. They move as one, determined, confident, convinced that nothing stands in their way. That's Gog's army. And as they descend, they find not a weak target, but a land protected by a covenant. It's like watching a storm roll toward a house built on a rock and realizing the storm never stood a chance. I will execute judgment upon him with plague and bloodshed. I will pour down torrents of rain. Ezekiel 38:22. God doesn't just observe, he intervenes. Now bring that into your world. When you read the headlines, threats of war, unrest, rising tension across the Middle East, does it fill you with fear or with perspective? Ezekiel wasn't given this vision to scare us. He was given it to prepare us. Sometimes the enemy comes from the north. Sometimes it's external, and sometimes it's internal. Fear, doubt, compromise. So here's the question. What's advancing toward you that looks like a threat, but might just be a setup for divine protection? Think about it. And if something comes to mind, write it in the comments. In the story of Gog, we reach a turning point, not just in prophecy, but in perception. The world sees war. God sees fulfillment. The world sees threat. God sees the final movement of a plan he set in motion long before. And we, caught in between, are called to trust. This is where spiritual awareness becomes vital, not panic, but perception. When the world shakes, those who are grounded in truth stand taller. Then the nations will know that I am the Lord, the Holy One in Israel. Ezekiel 39:7. That's the point. Always. Spiritual climax. Here's the moment that hits the soul. God doesn't just defend, he declares. He says, I have spoken, and it will come to pass. This isn't guesswork. This is certainty. And when we align with that, when we stand in agreement with the voice of the Almighty, we are no longer at the mercy of external forces. We become part of the divine architecture of history. That's what it means to live with prophecy in your bones. Not fear, not retreat, but clarity, confidence, presence. So ask yourself, how do you respond when the pressure rises? When enemies approach, whether they're literal, emotional, or spiritual, are you anchored or are you swayed by the noise? Remember, the battle is real, but so is the protection. Gog comes with force, but God comes with fire, the surprising judgment. Jeremiah 49:34-39, and Edom as a symbolic warning. Judgment. It's a word that most people avoid, heavy, sharp, uncomfortable. But sometimes, judgment is the very proof that justice exists. In Jeremiah 49, we see this revealed through the fall of Elam and symbolically through Edom. These weren't just neighboring nations, they were reflections, mirrors of pride, of unchecked power, of those who use strength to oppress. I will shatter Elam before their enemies. I will bring disaster upon them, even my fierce anger, says the Lord, Jeremiah 49:37. It's not wrath for wrath's sake, it's correction with a purpose. Because unchecked injustice breeds greater destruction. Now imagine this, a nation standing tall, confident in its resources, its armies, its influence. It silences the weak, mocks its enemies, and moves forward as if invincible. Then suddenly, silence. Not from their enemies, but from heaven. The kind of silence that precedes a shift, like a courtroom where the judge finally speaks. That's what Jeremiah describes. And Edom, often associated with pride and violence, becomes the caution sign. It's not just about borders, it's about behavior. It's about the nations and the people who live as if God's justice doesn't apply to them. So ask yourself, where in your own life are you exercising power, influence, voice, resources, without checking the heart behind it? Sometimes we assume judgment is reserved for the corrupt elite or foreign regimes, but judgment begins where pride resides. That might be in your home, your business, your thoughts. That's why this prophecy still speaks today. It invites reflection. And if you felt conviction stirring even slightly, don't run from it. Lean in. God corrects whom he loves, and his correction isn't condemnation. It's an invitation back into alignment. Here's the turning point. Even in judgment, God's mercy whispers. He says, "Yet I will restore the fortunes of Elam in days to come." Jeremiah 49:39. Pause on that. Even the ones who stood in defiance, if they turn, if they listen, can be restored. This isn't about final punishment. It's about ultimate perspective. God disciplines to redeem, not to destroy. And that tells you something critical about your own journey. If you've been humbled, it might be the beginning of your healing. If you've been brought low, it might be so you can be lifted up the right way. Spiritual climax, let this settle into your spirit. God is not afraid to confront what we ignore. He sees through the illusion of strength. He peers into the motives. He knows when power is used to dominate rather than serve. And in his justice, he brings down the high places, not to crush but to reset. That's what true judgment is, a reset to righteousness. The pride of your heart has deceived you, though you soar like the eagle. From there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. Obadiah 1:3-4. And if he speaks that, it's because he intends to rebuild something better. So let me ask you this. In the places where you lead, are you leading with humility? In the areas where you've been given influence, are you using it to lift others? Judgment isn't just about nations falling, it's about individuals learning. And the moment you become aware, the path to restoration begins. The power of prayer, 2 Chronicles 20 and King Jehoshaphat. Have you ever stood face to face with something that felt impossible? That's where Jehoshaphat was. King of Judah, leader of a nation, suddenly surrounded by enemies. 3 vast armies came together in an unexpected alliance, advancing fast and with one goal, to crush him. In the natural, it looked hopeless. But here's the shift. Jehoshaphat didn't panic. He prayed. "We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you." 2 Chronicles 20:12. That one sentence holds a key. Power doesn't come from having the answer. It comes from knowing where to look when you don't. Now picture the scene. The king stands before his people, not with a military strategy, but with a call to seek the Lord. He doesn't hide the fear. He doesn't pretend to be unshaken. Instead, he leads by lowering himself. That's where real leadership begins. Jehoshaphat resolved to inquire of the Lord, and he proclaimed a fast for all Judah. 2 Chronicles 23. When the threat grew louder, their prayers went deeper. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. And for you, it's a reminder that when pressure hits, your first step doesn't have to be action. It can be alignment. Then comes the breakthrough, not through swords, not through alliances, but through a prophetic word. A Levite named Jahaziel stands and declares, "Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the battle is not yours, but God's." 2 Chronicles 20:15. Just stop right there. Breathe that in. How many times have you carried a burden that wasn't even yours to carry? How many fights have you tried to win through force instead of faith? God wasn't asking Jehoshaphat to figure it out. He was asking him to trust, to show up, and let heaven do the heavy lifting. Now comes the part no strategist could plan. Jehoshaphat appoints singers, yes, singers, to lead the army. They step forward not with weapons, but with worship. And as their voices rise, confusion breaks out in the enemy camps. They turn on each other. By the time Judah arrives, the battle is already won. As they began to sing and praise, the Lord set ambushes against the men, and they were defeated. 2 Chronicles 20:22. That's not just a story, that's a strategy. Praise, even in the face of pressure, releases power you can't explain. Spiritual climax, this is where it all converges: fear, faith, and fulfillment. Prayer is not passive, it's not your last resort, it's your first weapon. And when it's paired with praise, the atmosphere changes. You don't have to see the outcome to start thanking God. That's what separates the anxious from the anchored. That's what transforms crisis into clarity. And maybe right now in your life there's a battle brewing. In your family, your finances, your future. What if the key to victory isn't found in fighting harder, but in praying deeper? So ask yourself, when pressure rises, what rises in you? Are you reacting, or are you returning to the one who fights for you? Because that same God who answered Jehoshaphat isn't distant. He's present, he's listening, and he's still moving when you pray. The promised rebirth, Isaiah 19:18-25, and the brotherhood of nations. What if the very nations that once warred against each other could be reborn as brothers? What if conflict was never the final chapter? That's what Isaiah proclaims in chapter 19. A prophecy that breaks every pattern, flips every expectation, and reaches into the future with shocking hope. In that day, Israel will be the third, along with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing on the earth. Isaiah 19:24. Pause and consider that. Egypt, Israel, Assyria, historical enemies, unified, not in conquest, but in covenant. This is not just idealism, this is divine intention. Now imagine this moment. Three nations whose histories are soaked in blood and betrayal, now walking toward one altar, one heart, one voice. Blessed be Egypt, my people, Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance. Isaiah 19:25. That's God talking, and you can feel the shift. Because this isn't how nations talk about each other, but it is how heaven sees them. That's what changes everything. Unity isn't man-made, it's divinely revealed. And when God calls enemies my people, something powerful is happening. Something new is being born. Let me bring it closer. Think of someone you've written off. Maybe a person, maybe a group, maybe even an entire nation or worldview. What if God's not finished with them yet? What if reconciliation is his goal, not just for families, but for civilizations? Isaiah saw a day when language, culture, and history wouldn't be walls, they'd be bridges. And that's not just about the Middle East, that's about you. Where are you being invited to build a bridge where there's only been distance? Leave it in the comments. What wall is God calling you to tear down? Isaiah speaks of a highway from Egypt to Assyria. A literal connection, yes, but also deeply symbolic. Roads unite what division tried to destroy, and today that still happens. People of faith in Iran, in Egypt, in Israel, they are praying, believing, building relationships, quietly fulfilling what Isaiah saw centuries ago. That means the prophecy is not just coming, it has already begun, and you, wherever you are, can be part of that. You can speak peace where there's hostility. You can choose understanding where there's confusion. That is real kingdom work. Spiritual climax. This is not about politics, it's about prophecy. And when God speaks restoration, he isn't dreaming, he's declaring. The vision of Isaiah is alive, and you can feel it calling. It says to every peacemaker, your work is sacred. It says to every heart heavy with division, healing is coming. In that day, there will be an altar to the Lord in the heart of Egypt, and he will send them a savior. Isaiah 19:19-20. Unity isn't naive, it's prophetic. And if God can unify what history separated, he can restore whatever's broken in you. So let's ask the question that matters. What part are you playing in the story of reconciliation? Are you feeding division or building connection? Because the future isn't just something you wait for. It's something you step into, with eyes open, with heart surrendered, with your words and your walk aligned with God's higher vision. The central role of Jerusalem, Zephaniah 3:9-10, and the calling of nations. Jerusalem. It's more than a city, it's a symbol, a spiritual anchor in the middle of global tension. And in Zephaniah 3, the prophet sees something extraordinary, not just Jerusalem being restored, but nations being drawn to her. Then I will purify the lips of the peoples, that all of them may call on the name of the Lord. My scattered people will bring me offerings. Zephaniah 3:9-10. This isn't nationalism. This is divine magnetism. God isn't gathering nations for war. He's drawing them into worship. And Jerusalem becomes the compass. Now think about how unlikely that sounds. the most contested city on earth, a place of conflict and contradiction, becoming the gathering place for a pure offering. But that's exactly what Zephaniah proclaims. It's as if God says, I'll take what the world sees as divided and use it to unify. That's the upside-down nature of the kingdom. What confuses man often confirms God's plan. It's not about Jerusalem's politics, it's about Jerusalem's prophecy. And when God chooses a place, he doesn't need the world's permission to fulfill his purpose there. Let me ask you something personal. Where in your life have you underestimated something because it seemed small or messy or controversial? Because Jerusalem reminds us where God has marked, man's opinion means nothing. Sometimes your most overlooked places become your greatest point of calling. Maybe your family, maybe your city, maybe your voice. You may feel insignificant, but if God is drawing people through you, that's a sign of sacred assignment. Let that settle into your spirit. What God claims, he will carry. Zephaniah speaks of a pure language, a unified voice rising from diverse peoples. This isn't fantasy. This is a future worth preparing for. People from beyond the rivers of Cush, far-off lands, bringing offerings not just of material, but of devotion. And here's what that means for you. Your worship matters. Your prayers matter. Even from across the world, your heart is part of a global movement. What feels private and personal to you echoes through eternity when it aligns with heaven's song. Spiritual climax. This is the moment of clarity. God is not passive, he is positioning. While nations rage, he is refining the language of the remnant, purifying the lips of those who seek him. And as he does, Jerusalem becomes more than geography, it becomes prophecy. It becomes a picture of where heaven touches earth. That's what you're part of. You're not just observing a story, you are in it. You're being called, purified, and prepared. The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. Zephaniah 3:17. That's not distance, that's presence. So here's the question. In a world of chaos, what is your Jerusalem? What center has God given you, and are you honoring it? Are you drawing others toward his presence, or being pulled away by distractions? Drop your answer below. Because when you find your spiritual center, everything else begins to align, the old and the new. Revelation 16:12 and global drought. Something changes when a river dries up. Life shifts. Strategies are exposed. And in Revelation 16:12, we see one of the most startling signs of the end. The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. This isn't just environmental, it's spiritual. A dried river here means open access, previously blocked paths made vulnerable. And if you're paying attention, you'll recognize the Euphrates doesn't just touch land, it touches legacy. It flows through modern-day Iraq, Syria, and near the edges of Iran. Now let's pull back. This river, one of the cradles of ancient civilization, drying up. It's not just about scarcity, it's about setup. The drying makes way. For what? For movement. For a march, for convergence. And what kind of kings are coming from the east? The text doesn't name them, but we know the region. We see the patterns. These aren't just geographical notes, they are prophetic blueprints. What appears to be a crisis is actually choreography, heaven's choreography, and the rhythm is accelerating. Consider this. How many things in your life feel like they're drying up? Resources, opportunities, clarity. But what if the drying is making room? What if God is removing something so that something greater can pass through? Because we often mourn the drought without realizing it's clearing the path. That's what Revelation reveals. It's not just doom, it's design. And maybe today in your life, something is shifting that feels like loss, but is actually preparation. So, tell me, what is drying up in your world right now? You see, in the natural, drought feels like death. But in the supernatural, drought sometimes signals destiny. Think about the Israelites in the wilderness. What sustained them wasn't rivers or rain. It was the word of God and the water from a rock. Maybe your dependence is being redirected. Maybe your trust is being purified. And that's not punishment. That's purpose. When we can't rely on the old flows, we must trust the new source, because God hasn't run out of provision. He's just rerouting it. Spiritual climax. This is where vision locks in. Revelation 16 doesn't ask us to fear the drying. It asks us to discern the shift. The river dries not because God has abandoned it, but because something must pass through. That applies to prophecy and to you. Maybe something in your life needs to clear so that divine movement can begin. Let the old run dry, if it means the new can be released. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? Isaiah 43:19. That's your confirmation, and it's on time. So ask yourself, what have you been trying to keep flowing that God might be drying up for a reason? Instead of resisting the drought, can you embrace the preparation? Because the next chapter doesn't always begin with abundance. Sometimes it begins with empty space, made ready for something far greater. The configuration of nations, Daniel 11, and the ongoing tension between Persia and Greece. History has a rhythm, a cycle. And in Daniel 11, we see one of the clearest patterns of that cycle, a clash of kingdoms repeated across generations. Now then, I tell you the truth. 3 more kings will arise in Persia, then a 4th, who will be far richer than all the others. When he has gained power, he will stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece. Daniel 11:2. What we're watching isn't just war. It's a spiritual narrative unfolding. Persia and Greece aren't just ancient empires. They represent worldviews, cultures, and spirits still alive today. Imagine 2 giants, not just battling with swords, but with ideas. Persia, steeped in influence, wealth, control. Greece, known for intellect, innovation, humanism. And every time they collide, the world shifts. That's what Daniel saw. A wrestling match that wasn't just physical, but prophetic. And what's wild? That tension still pulses through modern headlines. Iran, Persia, and the West, heirs of Greece, still circling each other, still sparking diplomatic and ideological confrontations. The book of Daniel reads like tomorrow's front page, written thousands of years ago. So, what does this mean for you? It means some battles aren't new. They're inherited. And some of the tension you feel in life may not even be about the present, but about unresolved patterns. Think about your family, your habits, even your relationships. Are you fighting today's fight or replaying yesterday's war? This is the kind of clarity Daniel gives, spiritual perception that cuts through confusion. Drop a comment. Where in your life do you feel an old cycle trying to reassert itself? The prophecy continues with leaders rising, alliances breaking, betrayals unfolding, and all of it was foretold in staggering detail. Daniel doesn't just tell a story, he maps out a sequence, and that's a gift to us. Because when you see the pattern, you stop reacting and start responding. You understand the spiritual atmosphere of the age. You see that empires may rise and fall, but God remains unmoved. His word, His timeline, His sovereignty untouched. And when you root yourself in that, you begin to live above the noise. Spiritual climax. The tension between Persia and Greece may play out globally, but the real battle is in the heart. Will you be led by the spirit of pride, domination, control, or by wisdom, humility, and truth? Daniel 11 is a warning, but also a blueprint. The wise will understand. Daniel 12:10. This is your invitation to see beyond the politics, to listen to prophecy, to realize that the conflict you're watching is part of something far older and far more spiritual than it appears. So here's the question: what battles are you meant to fight? And which are you meant to walk away from? Because not every conflict deserves your energy. Some are just echoes, and when you learn to discern the difference, You'll finally step out of the cycle and into real freedom. The prophetic climax, Zechariah 12:2-3, and the centrality of Jerusalem. Everything builds to this. The spotlight narrows, the narrative sharpens. And in Zechariah 12, we arrive at the threshold of prophecy's climax. I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations. Zechariah 12:2-3. This isn't metaphor, it's movement. God is not asking for attention, he is demanding it. And the focal point is Jerusalem, small in size, massive in meaning. The world's most fiercely debated piece of real estate becomes the hinge of history. Now think of it like this. The nations gather, drawn like iron to a magnet. But what they find isn't what they expect. They're not pulled in by politics, they're pulled by prophecy. Every military alliance, every diplomatic standoff, every headline that mentions this city, it's already been seen, it's already been spoken. And the trembling of the nations is not the beginning of chaos. It's the culmination of a plan. This is divine precision. And whether they acknowledge it or not, every player on the global stage is moving exactly where God intends. Let's bring this home. What is your Jerusalem? What center of gravity in your life keeps pulling your focus, drawing your energy, becoming the core of your spiritual conflict? Because just as nations are drawn to Jerusalem, your soul is drawn to purpose. And when you ignore that pull, when you fight it, you only create more friction. God wants to make you immovable, unshakable, grounded. But that happens when you align with the spiritual center He's given you. What is that for you? Leave it in the comments. Your answer might ignite clarity for someone else. In Zechariah's vision, God isn't passive. He isn't whispering behind the curtain. He is declaring loudly that Jerusalem will stand no matter what surrounds her. And here's what that means for you. Your spiritual center can withstand the weight of everything trying to break it. If God is in the middle of it, then even global pressure can't collapse it. That's why the nations stumble, not because Jerusalem is weak, but because she is unbreakable. What God establishes, no enemy can uproot. Spiritual climax. This is the edge of history, and Zechariah saw it before it arrived. He saw the eyes of the world turning toward a city that holds the keys to a divine mystery. And now you see it too, because this isn't just prophecy about land, it's prophecy about identity. Jerusalem represents covenant, and when the world gathers against her, God shows who truly reigns. On that day, I will set out to destroy all the nations that attack Jerusalem. Zechariah 12:9. This isn't superstition. This is sovereignty. So here's the final thought. When everything starts converging, when the world feels like it's collapsing into one moment, one place, one crisis, don't panic. Look at Jerusalem, and then look at your life. Are you aligned with the center or drifting from it? Because when you return to what God has marked, everything else finds its order. The divine response, Zephaniah 3:8, and the judgment to come. There's a kind of silence that isn't neglect, it's patience. In Zephaniah 3:8, God says, "Therefore wait for me, for the day I will stand up to testify. I have decided to assemble the nations, to gather the kingdoms, and to pour out my wrath." That's not rage, that's response, divine response. When you've seen injustice flourish, when you've watched evil go unchecked, when you've asked, why does nothing happen? This verse is the answer. God waits, but not because he is weak. He waits because his timing is perfect. It's the silence before the verdict, like a judge who pauses before dropping the gavel, not to delay, but to give one last chance. That's what makes this verse so compelling. It reveals the heartbeat of God. Slow to anger, rich in mercy, but committed to justice. You see, when we confuse patience with passivity, we forget the God we serve. He is not asleep, he is not distracted. He is aligning moments, nations, hearts. And when the time is full, he responds, fully and without apology. Now reflect on your own life. Where are you waiting for justice, for truth to be seen, for wrongs to be made right? Zephaniah 3:8 reminds us that divine justice doesn't operate on our clock, but it is never late. The delay isn't denial, it's divine setup. It's preparation. And sometimes the silence is a test. Will you trust when it feels like nothing is happening? Will you stay aligned when the verdict hasn't been read? Leave a comment. What are you waiting on that only God can settle? This kind of waiting isn't passive, it's active trust, and that's where many break down. They mistake quiet for absence. But in the kingdom, waiting is warfare. Every day you choose faith over frustration, you're aligning with heaven's timeline. And when that timeline hits its mark, no system, no regime, no injustice can withstand it. The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. Zephaniah 3:17. He doesn't just judge, he restores. He doesn't just avenge, he revives. Spiritual climax. Let this settle deep into your awareness. God does not forget, he does not overlook, and when he rises to respond, it is complete, it is clean, it is final. This is not about revenge. This is about righteousness. God waits, not because he lacks power, but because he loves deeply. And when the day of response comes, it won't just shock the world, it will vindicate the faithful. That is the promise hidden in the pause. That is the power behind the patience. So ask yourself with full honesty, what do you do in the silence? Do you doubt or do you prepare? Because those who trust through the quiet are the ones who walk boldly when the sound returns. And believe this, the sound is coming. The surprise of restoration, Jeremiah 30:18-19, and Israel's rising strength. You've seen it before, a city reduced to rubble, a life fractured by failure, a hope dimmed by delay. And just when it seems like the story is over, God speaks. In Jeremiah 30:18, he declares, I will restore the fortunes of Jacob's tents and have compassion on his dwellings. The city will be rebuilt on her ruins. Did you catch that? Not just restoration, but rebuilt on the ruins. That means the pain isn't wasted. The wreckage becomes the foundation. This is how God works. He doesn't just replace, he resurrects. Now imagine walking through that city. Walls once torn down now standing stronger. Laughter echoing through streets once filled with silence. It's not the same as before. It's better. Out of them will come songs of thanksgiving and the sound of rejoicing. Jeremiah 30:19. That's transformation. Not just fixing the broken, but making the broken beautiful. And for anyone who's walked through loss, through failure, through despair, this is your word. Restoration is not theory, it's a promise. And the promise is active. Maybe right now you're staring at ruins. Maybe something collapsed. Your business, your trust, your sense of direction. Here's what this prophecy teaches. Ruins are not the end. They're the place where God begins again. But he doesn't just restore to the level of before. He increases. He multiplies. Their children will be as in days of old, and their community will be established before me. Jeremiah 30:20. That's the kind of restoration only heaven can orchestrate, the kind that rewrites the ending. This is where we get it wrong. We often ask for what we lost, not realizing God intends to give us more. Restoration isn't a return to normal, it's a rise into destiny. And that shift in mindset changes everything. Stop asking for the old back. Start preparing for what's greater. Israel didn't just return from exile, they became a testimony. Their rebuilding wasn't just physical, it was prophetic. And maybe, so is yours. Spiritual climax. Pause and hear this clearly. Your lowest point may be your launching pad. What you thought disqualified you might be the exact place God uses to define you. Jeremiah saw a people returning, yes. But more than that, he saw joy emerging from loss. He saw multiplication emerging from isolation. And that's what restoration really is, when God takes the pain and produces power. I will bring him near, and he will come close to me. For who is he who will devote himself to be close to me? Jeremiah 30:21. That's the heart of restoration, closeness to God. So let me ask you, what ruins are you standing on today? And are you willing to believe that what feels final might actually be the foundation? Because when God rebuilds, it's never small. And if you stay open, if you stay faithful, you'll watch him turn wreckage into wonder. The open-ended finale, the lingering tension yet to be resolved. There's a moment in every great story where everything goes quiet, not because it's over, but because something greater is about to begin. That's where we are now. After kings and conflicts, promises and prophecies, we're left with a tension, a divine pause. The Bible closes many loops, but leaves one thread deliberately open. And that thread, it runs right through Iran, through Cairo, the deliverer, through Magog, the aggressor, through alliances, judgments, restorations, all pointing toward a conclusion that hasn't arrived yet. Iran's presence in prophecy is unlike any other. Sometimes a tool in God's hand, sometimes a force of resistance. From Cyrus, who didn't know God yet fulfilled his will, to Gog, who rises in opposition, it's clear the story is far from simple. And maybe that's the point. God's involvement with nations isn't linear, it's layered, strategic, dynamic. And the fact that Iran appears both as liberator and antagonist tells us one thing: God is not finished writing. The ending is still in motion. Now pause and ask, where do you find yourself in that kind of tension? A space where you're not sure which role you're playing, hero, villain, or something in between. The unresolved parts of your life might feel chaotic, but what if they're sacred? What if God is using the tension not to frustrate you, but to form you? Because sometimes the most important chapters are written in the unresolved moments, and maybe the silence in your story isn't an absence of God. It's the setup for your next move. The open ending in prophecy doesn't weaken the message, it strengthens the invitation. It says, you're part of this now. It asks you to pay attention, not just to politics or history, but to your own alignment, your own posture. If God is still shaping the nations, then surely he's still shaping you. And if prophecy is unfolding in real time, then you're not just a reader, you're a participant. What decision is waiting on your end of the story? Spiritual climax. This is the question that echoes through eternity. Will you stand at the edge of prophecy and simply watch? Or will you step into the story with faith, with vision, with surrender? Because the tension doesn't point to confusion, it points to choice. It means something is still possible, something is still open, and God's not done yet. Surely the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing his plan to his servants the prophets. Amos 3:7. You're being shown for a reason, and that reason may be bigger than you think. So now it's your turn. What part will you play in the story still unfolding? Where are you being called to align, to respond, to move? The tension isn't the end, it's the call. And the only question left is, will you answer? You've walked through fire and empire. You've seen Iran not through the lens of media, but through the mind of God. What began with a Persian king named Cyrus ends in tension, prophetic tension. Because the Bible doesn't give us a tidy conclusion. It gives us something far more powerful, a living storyline. One where Iran, once the unexpected ally, becomes a central figure in a finale still unfolding. You've seen the prophecies, the judgments, the redemptions, and now you understand. God does not write people off. He writes them in again and again. But how he uses a nation or a person depends entirely on one thing: their alignment. Because prophecy isn't fate, it's invitation. And whether a nation rises in redemption or collapses in resistance is a choice. Let's bring it closer. You are not standing outside this narrative, you're in it. Every decision you make, every truth you embrace or ignore, either pulls you deeper into alignment or pushes you further from your calling. And make no mistake, the prophetic clock is ticking, not with fear but with purpose. If God is still moving through kings and kingdoms, he can move through you, right now, right here. This story was never just about Iran, it's about awakening. And if you felt something stir while watching, if questions rose, if clarity hit, if conviction took hold, don't let that moment pass. Comment below what stood out to you most. And if you found value in this message, share it with someone who needs this clarity. Don't keep light to yourself, because the world isn't waiting for another opinion. It's waiting for voices that understand the time, the text, and the truth. Subscribe to the channel and stay connected, because in the next video we'll reveal something that most people will never see coming, and it will reshape how you read prophecy forever.